The story begins with the view of a great mansion. A handsome boy with light hair and butler-like looks seems to be the protagonist. He knocks on the door and calls out the name of Miss Eleanor, telling her that he is about to enter. Upon entering the room, a pretty dark-haired girl throws herself toward him, asking the boy, whose name is Arx, where he had been. The protagonist explains that he was reincarnated as a background character in an autumn genre video game, and that somehow the Yandere villainess had just fallen head over heels for him. Once this introduction scene concludes, the context of the story begins to be explained. Celestia Kingdom is an autumn game that became extremely popular in Japan thanks to its many possible endings. Among so many characters, Eleanor was very infamous for committing outrageous and horrible misdeeds. In this context, Arx Leafort, the protagonist, never appears nor is ever mentioned by name in any of the story branches. In short, he was just a background character with no relevant role, what is commonly referred to as an NPC in video games. Despite this, he is not bothered by being a mere filler character. When it comes to reincarnating in an autumn game world, the standard formula is to become invincible by using the knowledge from your past life. This makes you gain attraction from girls and become strong. However, the problem is that Arx barely remembers anything from his past life since he has no memories. He explains that it may be due to the rules of the world he is in. Even so, the only thing he remembers is that he lived in Japan. For now, he has no family or relatives in this world. He is simply living without trouble in the orphanage where he was taken in. Still, he seriously wonders why he was reincarnated in a place like this, since if he were the main character, then he could use some amazing magic, or perhaps live the experience of a school life with other characters. Despite this, Arx believes that at some point he will have a great opportunity, even for a background character with no powers like him. So he will enjoy this new world for now. The next day, Arx is found practicing with wooden swords. He easily defeats his opponent in a fight, who is someone from the village. The rival falls to the ground defeated and tells him that he is very good and surrenders. Everyone in the village praises Arx for his skill with the sword since he has managed to defeat all the adults of the village. A village child approaches him and tells him that he is very amazing, asking him if by training a lot someday he will be able to be as strong as him. Arx, with a laugh, tells him that of course he will achieve it, giving the boy encouragement. Nevertheless, in Arx's mind, he thinks that he was only training out of boredom since there are no online games in this world. So out of mere boredom, he managed to become very strong with the sword. Thanks to this, he could easily defeat all the adults of the village. Even so, he believes it is not a big deal, nor that he will become some knight or something. At best, this will serve him to get rid of monsters that come close to the village. Suddenly, the director of the orphanage, a kind man with a gentle personality, congratulates Arx for his skill and applauds him. He tells him that he is sure that someday he will become a great knight and caresses his hair, showing affection for him. Arx asks him if an ordinary person like him could become a knight, and the director replies that indeed someone as strong and intelligent as him will manage to become one. Then the director tells him that he has a favor to ask of him, leaving the protagonist intrigued. The scene quickly changes to Arx nervous, and with his heart beating fast in a luxurious mansion. The boy asks the director if he is sure they can be in a place like this since he feels out of place for a villager like him. But the director emphasizes that there is someone who truly wishes to see him. The door opens and a tall man with a wealthy appearance enters the room. He apologizes for being a little late and introduces himself as Adalbert Ancinous, being the count who governs the region. Arx is impressed by his title and nervously introduces himself as well. Adalbert asks if he is the boy they had spoken of, and the director confirms it, commenting that Arx is a very capable boy. Adalbert tells Arx that he has heard of his achievements and has an important favor to ask him. With a serious yet gentle tone of voice, the count asks him to become none other than the friend of his daughter. Arx is shocked by the surprise. He cannot believe that this count had summoned a mere orphan just to be his daughter's friend. The count mentions that the truth is that his daughter possesses a problematic nature. Arx believes at first that maybe it is an illness or a hateful personality. The count ushered in his daughter, who revealed herself to be a strikingly beautiful young woman with delicate features, her flowing dark hair and somber dress accentuating her elegance. She introduced herself as Eleanor Ancinous. The moment Arx heard her name, realization struck him. This was none other than the infamous Eleanor from the game, the very girl known for committing dreadful deeds and cursing everyone she encountered. She was the villainess who relentlessly tormented the game's protagonist with malice, the very root of all evil and the final boss. Even so, Arx could not help but question whether it was wise to befriend someone as fearsome as her. The Count brought the two closer and expressed his certainty that they would grow to be good friends, encouraging them to take a stroll in the garden and spend some time together. The next scene showed them walking along the paths outside, where Eleanor remarked that her father had been right, the garden was breathtakingly beautiful, and no matter how long she gazed at it, she never grew bored. Yet, Arx could not shake the unease within him. He recalled that the Count had mentioned she was his age, but it baffled him how someone like her could remain so expressionless. Still, he could not deny her beauty. In truth, she was captivating. Never before had he seen a girl clothed entirely in black, with eyes and hair just as dark, who radiated such allure. Even her lack of expression did little to diminish the spell her beauty cast over him. As they continued their walk, Eleanor suddenly stopped in her tracks, startling Arx. Concerned, he asked if something was wrong. Seeing her so silent and strange, he suggested they return to the mansion if she was feeling unwell. But with a cold, unreadable gaze, she told him that, just as she had suspected, he had no desire to be her friend, leaving Arx unsettled and confused. She then revealed that she understood everything. The reason, she deduced, was simple. He did not wish to associate with someone as cursed as her. Everyone felt the same, and she accepted that he, too, wished only to distance himself. Memories flooded in scenes of her being shunned by society, whispers of how everything she touched became tainted, how best it was to avoid her. Cruel remarks about her appearance had haunted her as well, that her eyes held no light, that she was always dressed in black. She explained that some tolerated her existence merely because she was a noble's daughter. Yet in time, no one spoke to her at all. All she received were glares filled with hatred and disdain. Arx was struck silent. Shaken by her words, she confessed that she had grown accustomed to such treatment, as it was the only way people ever reacted to her. Then, without warning, she demonstrated her magic upon a cluster of plants. Arx, stunned by the sight, realized that this was Eleanor's power, but one unlike anything he had ever seen. She held a wilted flower and told him to witness for himself. Before his eyes, its color drained further, shriveling into lifelessness. Everything she touched, she explained, withered and died, not only plants, but people as well. Meeting his gaze with an unflinching stare, she declared this to be her true nature. And now he could finally understand. Arx stood deep in thought, grappling with the revelation. He had never imagined she bore such a burden. Yet he could not help but wonder if he could save her, or if he could alter her fate. Slowly, he began to believe that perhaps this was the very reason he had been brought into this world. If he could change the course of the story and stay by her side, then maybe the world could achieve a happy ending, one free of the tragic fate he knew awaited her. With newfound resolve, Arx's determination solidified. He realized he must strive toward a future where no one was left unhappy, a future where even Eleanor would not have to suffer. He told Eleanor that, to him, she was not ugly in the slightest, quite the opposite. She was breathtakingly beautiful. His words left her cheeks flushed with a deep blush. Nervously, she admitted that while she appreciated his kindness, she knew her powers could still harm others. Arx acknowledged that risk, but insisted there had to be a better way for her abilities to be used. Reaching out, he touched the withered flower, and before their eyes it blossomed back to life. Finally, he assured her that even if she did hurt someone, he would find a way to set things right. With sincerity in his voice and determination in his heart, he asked her to accept his hand in friendship. In the next chapter, it begins with Eleanor being subjected to cruel discrimination, harsh comments echoing before everyone's eyes, some calling her a crow, others a demon. Suddenly, the distant image of her mother appears, standing before her daughter yet staring at her with severity. She coldly tells her to stop looking at her with those eyes, revealing the hatred and icy disdain she feels toward her own child. Eleanor's heart sinks, and she begins to weep, begging forgiveness simply for having been born. At last, she awakens from this nightmare thanks to Arx, who gently asks if she is all right, for he had the impression that she was trapped in a terrible dream. He explains that they had been speaking comfortably in her room when, overcome by exhaustion, she had suddenly fallen asleep, which must have been the cause of her nightmare. Without a word, Eleanor looks at Arx, and then breaks down in inconsolable tears, crying like a small child. Arx grows uneasy in the face of such raw emotions, uncertain of how to respond to the feelings of a girl, so he simply decides to embrace her, giving her soft pats as if to soothe her distress. Gradually, she calms down, and in that fragile moment she comes to understand that now, at last, she has a friend she can trust. Previously, she, downcast, mentioned that if he stayed with her, he would end up unhappy, but he told her it was the complete opposite. Since being with her would bring him great happiness, he told her that perhaps being together would eventually cause her to hurt him. But Arx replied that no one in this life leaves without having hurt someone, and that such a thing is normal. Faced with so much negativity from her, Eleanor was suddenly held by Arx, who tightly embraced her and told her that he only wanted her, leaving her deeply astonished. Returning to the present, she apologized for having cried because of the nightmare, but he told her not to apologize, since his chest would always be there for her whenever she needed it, and she laughed softly, thanking him. To this, he simply replied that it was only what any friend would do. She then opened her heart to him, admitting that she had never had anyone she could call an ally, let alone a friend, which is why it was difficult for her to believe she truly had someone like Arx by her side. Arx told her that such a feeling was normal, that friendship could take many forms, and that he was only doing what he felt was right. He explained that if she made more friends in the future, she would come to see that it was nothing but a natural feeling. Finally, he told her that communication required practice and repetition, and that they should take things slowly, since, in the end, life was much longer than either of them imagined. After this heartfelt speech from Arx, a few weeks passed, and her attitude began to change. As he now understood her true nature, she had become very intense, constantly demanding his attention. At one point she became upset because he was not listening to her. Yet to him these gestures were nothing but endearing. He apologized, explaining that he had simply been lost in thought, and she irritably asked if there was anything more important than her question. He gently took her hand and, in a tender voice, told her that of course there was nothing more important to him than her. This made her blush furiously, smoke metaphorically rising from her embarrassment. Arx, inwardly amused, joked with himself that he was too handsome, and therefore able to take advantage of such a quality. Her mood softened, and she asked him which clothes would suit her best. But just as he tried to think of an answer, a knock at the door interrupted them. It was her father, Lord Adalbert, asking Arx if he had a moment to speak with him. He apologized to his daughter, explaining that he needed to borrow her friend for a short while. But, as expected, she wore a very angry expression. With her usual tsundere attitude, she told him she didn't care, since Arx had already been distracted and wasn't paying her any attention anyway. Trying to persuade her, Arx turned back and whispered delicately in her ear that whatever clothes she wore would always look beautiful on her, no matter what, making her blush even more. The Count then explained to Arx that the request he had made was approved, and that starting next week, he would officially become a member of the household as a butler. Arx thanked him deeply for this, yet the Count asked if he was truly comfortable with the arrangement. Arx replied that he was, since it saved him the trouble of traveling back and forth, and he was also grateful to have a job. Hearing this, the Count was impressed by the remarkable capability of a boy as young as 7 years old. Finding him truly admirable, he told Arx that this was precisely the reason why he had chosen him to be his daughter's friend, and Arx firmly confirmed it. Finally, Arx left the room with eager anticipation, ready to take on his new role. Meanwhile, Eleanor impatiently waited for him, and through the crack of the door he noticed that she was still sulking. He called her name, but she furiously reproached him for taking so long as she thinks he was having so much fun with his dad talking to him. Arx, now dressed in his new butler attire, apologized respectfully, addressing her as "Milady." Kneeling before her with knightly courtesy, he solemnly declared that from that moment on, she should allow him to serve her as her devoted assistant. The mansion, usually a place of quiet dignity, had been transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Servants hurried through the corridors carrying trays, decorations, and fine silks. Among them worked Arx, moving briskly as he coordinated with the maids. His movements were efficient yet rushed. The task of readying the estate for such an occasion was exhausting, but his determination never faltered. In the next moment, a shift in time is revealed. 3 years had passed since Ark first entered the household as a mere child servant. Now at only 10 years old, he carried himself with a composure far beyond his age. What made the moment more striking was that Eleanor herself was soon to reach her 10th birthday, a milestone that in this world was celebrated with all the grandeur befitting nobility. 10 was not simply a number here, it was a passage, a recognition of growth, and families of status spared no expense to mark such an occasion. Everyone in the household had been swept into the fervor of preparation. Ark, however, quietly admitted to himself that this would be his very first time attending a noble's banquet, and the thought stirred a rare unease within him. While he adjusted a set of ornaments on a banquet table, a cheerful voice broke through the flurry of tasks. A maid approached, her face warm with gratitude, and she was Nanai, a bright girl who often assisted him in the busier hours of the day. She thanked Ark earnestly for his tireless efforts, telling him that it was because of his guidance that everything was now fully prepared for tomorrow's grand celebration. Ark responded with modesty, explaining inwardly that despite being only 10 years old, he was somehow already overseeing the orchestration of an entire noble gathering. Most of what he contributed were simple, practical suggestions carried over from the knowledge of his previous life, things he considered common sense. And yet to those around him, each instruction seemed ingenious, a mark of intelligence far beyond his years. Their praises embarrassed him, but he accepted them with quiet grace, knowing that none of this was truly for himself. It was all for Eleanor. This was to be her first extravagant party since their meeting, and Ark wished above all to see her smile radiant with delight. For that, he was willing to endure any fatigue. Later, when the final preparations were settled, Ark retreated to the training grounds. Drawing upon his innate talent, he conjured a blade of stone, its surface rough yet sharp, and set about his exercises. His strikes echoed across the courtyard until his arms trembled with exhaustion. Rather than rest conventionally, he restored himself with a surge of magic, a display that left Nanai had secretly followed to watch utterly astonished. Once satisfied with his practice, Ark decided to call it a day. But just as he was about to leave, a soft, familiar voice reached his ears. Turning, he saw Eleanor standing nearby, her figure framed by the evening light. She confessed she had been waiting for some time, though he had not noticed her presence. Concern flickered in his eyes, and he scolded her gently, warning that she could catch a cold out here. To this, she answered with a mischievous smirk, saying that if she did, he would simply have to warm her himself. There was a pause between them, heavy yet tender, before she accused him of being far too busy lately. He countered calmly, reminding her that they had only spoken just the other day. Suspecting that she was exaggerating, she huffed, muttering half to herself that he belonged to her before quickly correcting her words, declaring instead that as her servant, he was obliged to remain constantly by her side. Ark apologized sincerely, explaining that his busyness was all for her sake, for tomorrow's grand celebration. Hearing this, her expression softened. She admitted the importance of the day, conceding that it could not be helped, though a faint trace of dissatisfaction lingered in her gaze. As they began walking back to the mansion together, she suddenly asked if he ever felt lonely. The question caught him off guard. Ark shook his head, explaining with honesty that he never felt alone, for Lord Adalbert and the other servants had always treated him kindly. At his words, Eleanor's mood shifted sharply. A jealous glint lit her eyes, her lips tightening as though his contentment with others unsettled her in ways she herself could not explain. Before Ark could notice fully, she turned away, masking her emotions beneath a fragile facade. Finally, a small sneeze escaped her, revealing the cost of her stubbornness in lingering outside. With a sigh, Ark guided her back, silently vowing to ensure she would be well for tomorrow. The day of the celebration dawned at last. The mansion's grand hall sparkled with chandeliers and gilded decorations, its walls alive with the murmur of noble guests. Lord Adalbert, standing tall and dignified, welcomed the gathering, his voice carrying through the chamber with practiced authority. Yet when he leaned toward Ark, his words grew sharp and commanding. He ordered the boy to keep his eyes open and to eliminate anyone who dared draw too close to his daughter. Ark nodded without hesitation, his youthful face set with rare steel. As the evening unfolded, he noticed two figures lingering near the edge of the hall, their movements suspicious, and their eyes scanning Eleanor with unnerving focus. Arx's gaze locked onto them, sharp and unyielding. But when they realized he had marked them, unease flickered across their faces. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the two men vanished into the crowd as though swallowed by shadows, leaving Arx with the chilling certainty that danger was nearer than anyone realized. At last, the birthday girl made her entrance. Eleanor appeared at the top of the staircase, her figure framed by the soft glow of chandeliers. She wore a dress of delicate black silk embroidered with silver threads that shimmered as she moved. The transformation left Arx momentarily breathless. She looked radiant, almost otherworldly, and he could hardly believe this was the same gloomy, withdrawn girl he had met 3 years ago. Her once expressionless face now carried a quiet dignity, her beauty undeniable, and for a brief moment the entire hall seemed to fall into silence as every guest turned to stare at her. Arx thought to himself how incredible it was that a child could grow and change so much in just a few short years. Yet he forced his composure to remain intact, reminding himself that his duty today was not to indulge in admiration, but to oversee the smooth flow of the event. His thoughts were interrupted by Nanai, who approached him and whispered that he had been summoned. Eleanor was calling for him to take his place as her guard for the evening. Arx frowned slightly at the request, sensing it was less about duty and more about her insistence on keeping him close. As he stepped forward, he became acutely aware of the weight of countless eyes on him. The nobles in the hall whispered among themselves, their stares sharp and prying, as though trying to pierce through his very being. Their gazes asked a silent question: who was this boy, and why was he standing so close to the young lady of the house? Eleanor broke the silence with her characteristic bluntness. She declared that Arx was her attendant, though she pointed out with irritation that he was rarely by her side. One of the nobles scoffed that there was no need for a mere servant to sit next to the main guest of honor. But Eleanor's eyes flashed, and with an uncharacteristic boldness, she raised her voice, insisting that Arx was not just any servant. Then, with a sudden and heartfelt announcement, she revealed something that startled the crowd: that today was not only her birthday, but Arx as well. They were the same age, yet unlike her, his birthday had never been celebrated. Her words rang through the hall, catching Arx off guard. A warmth spread through his chest as he muttered his thanks, his cheeks burning faintly at her unexpected kindness. He realized then just how much she had changed from the pessimistic, self-loathing girl of the past, and the thought filled him with both pride and a quiet affection. But even in this touching moment, Arx's sharp eyes remained vigilant. Out of the corner of his vision, he noticed something that made his heart tighten: the same two suspicious men from earlier. They had reappeared, and though the crowd masked them, there was one with lips curled into a mischievous, unsettling smile.